Is your child struggling at school because they have ADHD? And do you feel like you are hitting your head against a brick wall because you don't feel you're getting the support you need for your child? Well, fear not, for in this video, I will share some top tips on how to support your child with their ADHD in school. Now, do stay on until the end of this video because I'm going to share with you some positive stories about people who have ADHD but have really made a success of their lives. And this will hopefully inspire you and your child to realise that ADHD isn't really a disorder, it's more of a superpower. Hello, and my name is Tamsin, and I run the website theonlychildclub.net, and I'm dedicated to supporting you and your gorgeous one-child family, helping you all to grow, flourish, live life to the full. Now, before I start, I guess I need to explain what ADHD is. It stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactive Disorder. Now, I am no doctor, and so I'm not going to give you a full definition in my own words. I'm actually going to use the definition brought to us by the website adhduk.co.uk, and I will put a link into the description below to that website so you can find out more about the organisation and what they do and how they can support you and your child with ADHD. So they describe ADHD like this. ADHD is a disorder that is defined through analysis of behaviour. People with ADHD show a persistent pattern of inattention and/or hyperactivity, impulsivity that interferes with their day-to-day functioning and/or development. So here are some of the signs that your child may have ADHD and may present this in the school setting. Firstly, they may show that hyperactive tendencies. This means in the classroom they may find it very, very hard to sit still at a desk for very long periods of time. In fact, I think a lot of kids find that quite challenging, but especially those with hyperactivity disorder, and they may end up disrupting the class due to their hyperactivity and sadly get into trouble as a result. The other thing that they may struggle with is organisational difficulties. They may forget lots of things. They may leave their PE kit behind or at home because they've forgotten about it. They may be prone to losing a lot of things. They may also forget their homework or do it at the last minute. And this can be a result of being time blind. I don't know if you've ever heard of the term time blindness, but I will share about it in a moment. If your child has ADHD, they may also find it difficult to have good social interactions with people. They may find it hard to pick up on cues, or they may accidentally overshare information, which can be used against them. The thing is if your child has got ADHD and is struggling to communicate with other children, well, the other children won't necessarily have the maturity to know how to respond to your child, and therefore may either intentionally or unintentionally isolate your child. Sadly, a lot of children who suffer from ADHD can feel isolated and lonely, and sometimes, sadly, they can be prone to being bullied. Now, if your child does struggle with making friends or maintaining relationships, I do have a video about how to make friends, and in that video I share some tips on what you can do to initiate friendships and, more importantly, how to maintain those friendships. There's also a blog post on the onlychildclub.net that will share some additional information to help your child make friends, and I'll put that in the description below. And lastly, if your child does have ADHD, and this is a really sad fact, but don't worry because I'm going to help you with this. Many children who have ADHD may struggle to reach their full potential, academically speaking, because of their ADHD symptoms. But do not worry about that, because in this video I'm going to help you put things into place to help your child navigate through academia so that hopefully they can reach their full potential, academic potential, despite their ADHD. So there isn't a cure for ADHD. As I said, it's a little unfortunate that they even use the term disorder, and I think quite a few charitable organisations that help kids who have got ADHD kind of want to take away the term disorder. It's a neurological issue and it's just about how the brain is wired. But children with ADHD can learn, they just might have to learn in a little bit of a different way. The problem is that the school system can be a little bit one size fits all. I'll talk about that a little bit later on. But here are some things that you can do if you're sending your child to school and you either have a diagnosis or you think your child has ADHD, where you can work with the school to make sure that they put everything in place to help your child reach their full potential. So the first thing you need to do is get your child diagnosed as soon as you possibly can. Now, having a diagnosis of ADHD comes with its pros and its cons. Children who've got that diagnosis, it can be easier to approach a school and say, hey, my child's got this definite diagnosis, and then the school can do something about it. Now, schools do things anyway. They do interventions anyway for children who are struggling with their learning, whether they've got this label or not of ADHD, autism, whatever it could be. If children are struggling in schools, whoever they are, whether they've got a label or not, if the school identifies as an issue, they will put interventions in place. Okay, so be reassured on that front. Your child doesn't have to have any kind of diagnosis to get support in the school if your child is showing any sort of problems and struggling. However, it can be helpful to have the diagnosis for your sake and for your child's sake, especially for your child. It can help them feel like, it's not them as such. It's not, they're not a naughty child. They may have ADHD and they may feel a bit more vindicated, I think is the right word. And I think this is why a lot of adults feel when it comes to finally getting diagnosis of ADHD in adulthood. If they didn't get it as children, there can be a sense of that explains a lot. That getting that diagnosis, you say, hey, actually, yeah, it's because my brain is wired a little bit differently from the average person, and this is why I'm struggling in a world that's been designed for this kind of brain, but my brain's like this kind of brain. And I feel I can share this with you because I've got to admit, I wonder whether I've got ADHD. So I only went to see a doctor a few months ago. I'm on a very long waiting list, as everyone is these days. I'll talk about that a little bit later on, about the waiting list on the NHS here in the UK. But a doctor said, what would you do if you got that diagnosis? I said, one thing, it could vindicate me in a way and explain a little bit of why I respond and act the way that I do. So if you can, try and get at that diagnosis early. Now, the way you can go about getting a diagnosis for your child or to get your child assessed is to go to your doctor first, not to the school. Go to your doctor first. Say, I think my child has got ADHD because they're demonstrating this behaviour. Your doctor can then write some sort of report, and your doctor will likely contact your child's school and get a report from them about how your child learns and behaves in school. Then the doctor will send off that report to the local neurodiversity clinic in your area, and your child will be put on a waiting list, and they'll be waiting for years and years and years. Believe me, I know too many cases where that's the case. If that is the case. And if you can afford to get your child assessed privately, by all means do that. As I said, there are pros and cons about getting the diagnosis. One of the cons, unfortunately, is that some parents and some schools and teachers, they almost dismiss the child or use the ADHD, and children themselves, and I've witnessed this myself, working in schools, have used the ADHD as an excuse to then not do any work, to then not put the work in, almost thinking that there's no point in working hard because I've got ADHD and I'm always going to behave like this, and there's no salvation for me because I've got ADHD. Sometimes having that diagnosis actually lowers your expectation of your child and can lower your child's own expectations of their own potential. So just be aware of that in regards to getting your child diagnosed, whether it's actually going to be a healthy thing or maybe not such a healthy thing for your child. And there are some health professionals out there who do question whether it's worth getting that diagnosis for your child, especially if schools are going to put interventions in anyway. But if you do it, try and do it as early as you possibly can when they're in primary school. So if they are on a waiting list, hopefully they'll still get assessed before they end their school time in year 11. So the second point is you've got to be a tiger parent. You've got to be a tiger parent all the time, unfortunately, in this system. You have to keep fighting for the rights of your child. If your child is on a long waiting list to get assessed for having ADHD, that doesn't mean you can't keep pushing the school to make sure your child gets all of their needs met as best as possible.
No, go fight for your family.
So you need to contact the SENCO, you need to go into the school, you need to phone them. If you have to, write to your head teacher, the head teacher of the school, and make sure that your child is on the top priority so that they can keep supporting your child throughout their school career. It's a real shame that it has to be like this, but those that shout the loudest seem to get the attention. But if you're too polite, and I confess I'm too polite, if you're too polite, they can fob you off and they can push the can down the road, as it were, and not actually address the needs of your child. So it's very important to be that tiger parent and to really push for your child. And I've seen it in plenty of parents. There are some parents that their child gets everything because the parent has really fought on behalf of their child. The other thing you need to do is get to know your child's SENCO in the school. So the SENCO stands for Special Educational Needs Coordinator. And the SENCO will be your main go-between for your child and their education and the school. So one of the things the SENCO can do is they can contact outside organisations, including child psychiatrists, who can come in, and sometimes they do assessments on children like that. SENCOs also have contact with other disability charities and organisations in your county. So some people can come in and help your child if they've got particular needs. For example, a speech therapist may come in if your child has got a speech development issue in, say, reception or in year 1, and sometimes they can come in and help your child with that. So the SENCO has got this connection with other organisations within the county that they can draw on. The other thing that the SENCO can do is put together a learning support plan for your child. They are the head of the SEN department, the Special Educational Needs department in the school, so they can identify if your child needs additional help with maths, additional help with English perhaps, or even with social skills, things like that, and they can put together a plan and some interventions for your child to attend. if they identify that your child has those needs, but if you identify your child has those needs, but your child has slipped through the net at the school, this is where you have to be that tiger parent. Go in and you tell that school what you want your child to have in regards to intervention. Keep in contact with the Senko, keep emailing them, and occasionally, if you have to, go into the school, have a meeting with the Senko. The Senko can also train teachers in the school about how they can adjust their lessons to meet the needs of children with neurodiversity issues. They can also monitor your child's progress through things like GL assessments and other assessments. And also, they can train staff, and they can also help you as a parent and maybe give advice to you or how you can support your child and their educational needs in the home. However, I'm going to also share what you can do to support your child with their educational needs, especially if they've got ADHD in the home. So the first thing you want to do is help approach your child with their organisational skills. Now, a way that you can do this is make sure everything is labelled. Even when your child is in secondary school, make sure all their clothes are labelled, all their PE kits, all their stationery is labelled with their name, because children who've got ADHD are likely to mislay things. So if they've mislaid their PE kit, they'll hopefully, when it's found, they can find it's theirs because their name is on it, right? The other thing you can do is, if you don't already have an Alexa smart speaker, then that's something I recommend that you have. And I'll put a link for one in the description below. I use it all the time to remind me of things. My Alexa is basically a sort of bit of a PA and reminds me of lots of things, and she's also a timer, and I talk about the Alexa, using an Alexa as a timer in my previous video about how to encourage your child to play independently. You can use an Alexa for that. So I use it a lot, so that's why I recommend it. And you can use your Alexa for your child to help remind all of you of the things that you need to remember, e.g. Alexa, remember PE kit on Tuesday mornings, 7:30, 8 o'clock. So it's all ready and you can send your child, and they never forget their PE kit, which is a common occurrence for many children, but especially children with ADHD. And you can do that sort of reminder for lots of things. In regards to supporting your child with homework, that's where that time blindness can come in, where you see the time, but you can't quite comprehend what 50 minutes feels like, what an hour feels like when you've got ADHD, because you've got that attention deficit aspect to it. So you can easily go down a rabbit hole and you can say, hey, I've got plenty of time. I'll look up something on the internet, and then you look up something else, and before you know it, time's gone way by and you've wasted lots of time. You haven't actually got on with your homework. And there's a lot of procrastination can happen with this time blindness that people speak of. So the way that you can avoid that with your child is, again, using the Alexa, put on a timer for a specific amount of time for your child to do their homework, and then also have some sort of reward for your child once they have completed it. So they've got something to work towards. Bit of a carrot and stick thing, but your child can think, oh, I can get some sweets, or, well, not sweets, I'll talk about that in a minute, but maybe some extra time on a video game or whatever treat you think is best for your child to motivate them to continue with their homework. The other thing you can do at home to support your child if they've got ADHD, and it will help them in the long term in regards to their education, is being very mindful what you give your child to eat. Obviously, the high sugary stuff is going to peak in their insulin, but then they're going to have dips, so they're going to get hyper and then tired and hyper and tired. That goes with anyone who's, energy levels are coming from sugar. It's not a good thing. So cut down on the sugar, cut down on the carbs, having really good quality meals packed full of ingredients like especially omega-3, that's going to be really helpful, and including some vitamin B's, because like vitamin B6, 12, because that can really help with the nervous system. And remember, ADHD is a neurological issue, so the nervous system will be affected by that. But definitely the omega 3 is really important. So lots of lovely oily fish will really help your child and their brain and their cognitive abilities. So that's some of the ways that you can help your child at home so that they're better prepared when they go to school. And of course, making sure they go to bed early, have a really good night's sleep, and are not addicted to the phone and the short attention span TikToks. And I have got a video about that, how my child is a TikTok addict. By all means, go and have a look at that. It's really important. There seems to be a lot more children who are being diagnosed with ADHD. And there's a number of schools of thought on that one. Some people think it's because we understand it better, so we're able to diagnose more accurately children who've got ADHD. It's much more well known as an issue, as a disorder, as opposed to in the past where children may have ADHD and they've been known as a dunce, you know, to wear the dunce hat, or, you know, I'm talking Victorian period there, or that they've got really bad behaviour, that they are really disruptive, and it's just put down to bad behaviour without recognising actually there may be some hyperactive disorder there as well. So that's a good thing in a way, that we are a lot more aware of ADHD, and therefore that's why more children are being diagnosed with that. But there's another school of thought, and I tend to believe this one as well, that our current Western diets and lifestyles, especially with TikTok and these sort of short videos that you can watch one after another, that is going to have a massive impact on our attention. And if a child is looking at this at a very, very young age and their brain's already making connections and it's already developing and it's used to having very short videos, that's going to affect their attention. So maybe more children are developing or getting ADHD because of the Western lifestyle. That's just my theory. I don't know. What do you think? Put in your comments below why you think more children are being diagnosed with ADHD in America and in this country. I'd be really interested to know what your views are on that one. And the last little hint I'm going to suggest to you, and it's not a little hint, it's a really big one. Consider homeschooling your child if you can. If you're in the position to be able to homeschool your child, you can then create a much more bespoke curriculum that's going to suit your child and your child's needs. You can obviously join a homeschooling network in your area. There's lots of them. They're developing a lot of them. They're growing. Homeschooling is becoming quite a big business, definitely over in the United States, and I think to a degree here in the United Kingdom for a number of reasons. So if you're thinking of homeschooling your child, don't worry about your child being lonely. I think some people are afraid, you know, if they've got an only child and they're not going to school, but they haven't got any brothers and sisters to relate to or socialise with, they're not going to have any social skills. But you can, even if you're homeschooling just one child, because you can join the homeschooling networks in your area. And if there isn't any, maybe set some up. So I am going to do a video in the future at some point about homeschooling an only child. I'm just looking for somebody to do an interview with on that one, because they'll probably have a better idea than me. I obviously tried to do the homeschooling for my daughter during lockdown, as we all did, but I figured out it wasn't quite for her. But I reckon it probably could be a good option for you and for your child, depending on your child's temperament and personality. But one of the good things you can do with your child, if they've got ADHD, in a homeschooling setting, is you can teach your child all the different subjects, but through a project, because children with ADHD, you know, if they're just doing one subject like maths, just pure maths, boring as, but if you put a story behind it, or if you apply the maths in something else, then they might be interested. So for example, every 6 weeks in your homeschool classroom, you can set up a project. Maybe you do a project about Christmas, and you can then look at all sorts of things. Maybe you could make some mince pies with your child. So they're having to learn maths by doing weighing and measuring of the ingredients. Maybe you can do some history about Christmas and different ways that cultures celebrate Christmas. So you're looking at geography and history. Perhaps you might want to look at religion and look at the story of Christmas and what it's all about and what Christians believe. Maybe you want to then suit off and look at Hanukkah and what Jewish people believe and celebrate at that time of year. I mean, you could look at, say, snow perhaps and science and how snow is made. You can look at all sorts of different subjects and then see how you can apply it into the project. Then your child could perhaps have a project book where they create all these things. Maybe they could write a poem or a story. So you're doing some English. Perhaps you can read a Christmas carol or another book. So there's so many things you can do in that project, and it's more likely to keep your child's interest because they're interested in that particular subject. So that's something you can definitely do in homeschooling. The other thing you can do, obviously, with homeschooling is take your child out wherever, to the park, to museums, go abroad, go travelling. Your child will learn so much. You go to travelling to interesting places like Egypt, looking at the pyramids. Your child's more likely to learn that way. So that's something else that you could consider if you're thinking of homeschooling your child. It's definitely an alternative lifestyle, but your child will get a lot out of it. But you've got to still make sure your child is with other children as well and doing things with other children. Fabulous. So just finishing off here, people with ADHD can get quite obsessed with the subject that they're studying, and that's a good thing in a way. They may sort of be really narrow focused and producing something, and they skip dinner, they're not interested in anything else going on around them, they're in the flow. I talk about the flow state in my last video about playing independently. Don't break the flow, let them get on with it. And this is where, you know, creative geniuses can produce amazing work. If they've got ADHD, but they're interested in the subject, they can put their whole heart and soul into that and produce great works. The only issue is if you've got ADHD, you can actually start making really great work and then you give up and you go off and do something else because you get bored. So that's where you need to have some sort of accountability with somebody else to make sure you get the work done, and obviously those rewards, so you can get that little dopamine fix one way or another when you finally achieved one of your goals. And this can be said of adults as much as children who've got ADHD. Sometimes you need to set a goal for yourself and keep moving towards that. So when you want to give up, you remind yourself, oh no, I've got this treat at the end if I complete this. So you end up learning how to be accountable to yourself, and your child also needs to learn to be accountable to themselves. But this is a good thing about people with ADHD. They can produce amazing works. And so I thought, as I said to you at the beginning of this video, I was going to share some positive stories about people who have got ADHD, but they have become quite successful in life, as we judge success to be rich and famous celebrity types. So here are a few celebrities who have got ADHD, and obviously they've done very well for themselves. The first one is the TV presenter Ant McPartlin. He is with Ant and Dec, and you can see the hyperactivity. He's full of energy, absolutely brilliant. So he's obviously been able to use that side of his ADHD to be able to present great programs and to have that level of energy to be able to put into that. You've also got the comedian Angela Barnes, the singer-songwriter Kat Burns, the actress-director Greta Gerwig, the rugby star James Haskell, the entrepreneur James Middleton, the racing driver Lewis Hamilton, the gymnast Simone Biles, and the chef Heston Blumenthal. And Heston is quite interesting because he's obviously had a lot of struggles with the ADHD, and he wasn't actually diagnosed with that until a lot later on in life. And I think he's had a lot of issues as a result of that. Unfortunately, people with ADHD can easily end up suffering from depression and having other problems. But he's come through that, and he has been quite the advocate for people with ADHD, and he has written quite a few things about this subject. One of the things he's been talking about, and I remember reading an article about this, is how he'd like to see more workplaces adjust for people with ADHD to get the most out of people with ADHD. Because if you have got this condition, as it were, this disorder, if you want to call it that, but you have been able to work through that, and you have mechanisms in place to be able to function well in society, function well in the workplace, then you can actually bring so much more creativity and imaginative ideas into the workplace. So that's something that Heston Blumenthal has been advocating recently. So he's a very, very interesting person to read about and to find out. So by all means, do have a look at some of the videos about Heston Blumenthal and how he's managed his ADHD over the years. Well, I hope you found this video really, really helpful. If you have, please don't forget to put the old like thumb up, click that, and more importantly, please don't forget to subscribe to this channel. It's still a relatively new channel. I'd love to be able to develop it and make a lot more videos for you to help you and your wonderful one-child family. So please do remember to subscribe so I can help you all out. Thank you ever so much. Toodles.